Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Book Talks, a series of conversations with authors about their books, hosted collaboratively by Pittsburgh Theological Seminary Center for Writing and Learning Support and the Barber Library. My name is Shan, and I'm the director of the Center for Writing and Learning Support here at the seminary. I'd like to welcome guests from Pittsburgh and beyond, including Scotland, Colorado Springs, Boston, and even further afield. We welcome you today. Please be aware we are recording this event, and it will be available for viewing on the Book Talks page of the PTS website and on our YouTube channel later. Today, we welcome my two esteemed colleagues, the Reverend Dr. Hunter Farrell and the Reverend Bala Khyllep, whose new book, Freeing Congregational Mission, A Practical Vision for Companionship, Cultural Humility, and Co-Development, has been published this year by InterVarsity Press. We congratulate them on this fine effort that they've made and look forward to having this conversation with them about the book. If you check in your chat window, you'll find links for the publisher and for bookshop.org where you can purchase the book. Now, before I introduce Hunter and Bala further, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Michelle Spomer, Director of Barber Library, and Tisha Wu, User Services Librarian, who have helped make this possible and will be helping me watch for your questions in the Q&A during the event. Under their guidance, Barber Library has created a series of library guides, also known as LibGuides, for our book talks. You'll see the link for the LibGuide today in the chat. If you click on that link, you'll go to the library's website where you'll find many resources linked to our conversation today. Also, before we move on, I'd like to thank Holly McKelvey, Administrative Assistant to the Writing Center, who registered all of you. Also, a big thanks to our Communications Department, especially Melissa Logan and Robin Menard, for helping us get the word out about this event. They do a lot to make sure you hear about what we're up to, and we are grateful to them for that. And a special thank you to our indefatigable IT department, including Bobby Jarsulik, who is behind the scenes right now, expertly taking care of any technology issues that might come up. And this is after a really busy week here at the seminary. May is the month of mayhem, our president Asa Lee says, and that's especially true for the IT folks. Bobby, thanks for your help. So a little bit of information about our format today. After I introduce our guests, I'm going to turn it over to Hunter and Bala for a 20-minute presentation about their work. Then I'll kick off the Q&A period with a couple of my own questions. But we welcome, in fact, we want your participation. So I urge you to make some notes during Hunter and Bala's presentation and to type a question in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I'll voice those questions so that our guests can respond to them. Also, during this event, Hunter and Bala are going to turn the tables on you, our audience. Be prepared for them to ask you questions. To answer, simply type in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be watching those and I'll voice them for you on your behalf. One more quick note, you'll see a live transcription button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to read along with us as you listen. And now to formally introduce our guests who may be familiar to many of you as they are the leaders of the World Mission Initiative here at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. The Reverend Dr. Hunter Farrell is the director of the World Mission Initiative at PTS after 30 years of mission experience, which he brings to the position. He has been a professor in the Democratic Republic of Congo, coordinator of the Presbyterian Church USA's mission work in East and West Africa, a community organizer addressing issues of poverty and justice in Peru, and the director of World Mission for the PCUSA in Louisville. Hunter attended schools with names that I hope I don't butcher too badly, but I'm going to try them. He received his Doctor of Anthropology at Pontificia I'm sorry, Hunter, I'm so bad. Universidad Católica de Peru. He did a postgraduate diploma in France and attended Fuller Theological Seminary for his MDiv and received a BA at the University of Texas at Austin. He has published articles in periodicals including Missiology, the Journal of Latin American Theology, and Christianity Today. The Reverend Bala Khyllep is the Associate Director of the World Mission Initiative of Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. Bala grew up in Northeast India and belongs to a Khasi group, which is an indigenous group evangelized by the Welsh Presbyterian missionaries in the 1840s. And Bala, my apologies, but I will probably say this wrong. You attended Shillong College, India for your Bachelor of Science, Serampore College, India for the Bachelor of Divinity degree, which is the equivalent of the MDiv, and Princeton Theological Seminary for the Master of Theology. Bala is an ordained minister of Word and Sacrament in the Presbyterian Church USA, and prior to joining WMI, Bala co-pastored a church along with his wife Cheryl in Britain, South Dakota. As part of his work with WMI, Bala leads mission workshops in Pittsburgh area churches and beyond. Now, right before I turn things over to our guests for their presentation, I'd like to remind our audience, if you have questions or if Hunter and Bala ask you a question, please type it in the Q&A or the chat. I'll keep my eyes peeled and will voice your questions and responses at appropriate moments. And now I'd like to say to Hunter and Bala, welcome. It is a real gift to host you on Book Talks finally, and I'm excited to hear your presentation and get to hear a little bit more from you about your book and your work.
Thanks so much, Shan. We're really grateful for all of you coming out on what's probably a beautiful Friday afternoon for many of us in this circle. But we're excited because the topic that we have thought a lot about these days, these past months and years, is something that's very close to your heart, we know, and we think something that's very close to the heart of God. And that's why we begin with in a spirit of humility and seeking of God to lead our conversation in ways that can glorify God and draw all of us together. So we'll be thinking together about some of the major ideas that come out of the book that we wrote together, Freeing Congregational Mission. It's meant for the congregational mission leaders, the people in every congregation who are basically making the decisions with where to allocate billions of dollars every year and send millions, tens of millions of volunteers to places near and far. And so we think this is a really important group in the economy of mission, in that structure, and we'd like to provide them with the tools that they need. So we spent a lot of time, Bala and I, talking with lots of congregational mission leaders, including mainline Protestant folks, Catholic parish leaders, and evangelical congregational mission leaders. All of them together helped us to get a better picture. We had a series of surveys and questionnaires, and then follow-up conversations and interviews, sometimes in groups and sometimes individually. Well, what it pointed us to was some of the ways that congregations engage in mission. And so we're going to lift up what are three of the most popular 5 activities that congregational mission leaders engage to engage their folks in mission. So everyone knows about mission trips. It represents between $3.5 and $5 billion expended by U.S. congregations every year. This is perhaps the most popular of mission activities. And mission scholars have been very critical of short-term mission trips. And I can list, and the book lists with some detail, all of the critiques that have been made. And yet there's this voice in the hearts of many people who push back and say, yes, but I know that I was transformed, or someone that I know was transformed in that experience. And so we try to look more deeply. We dedicate an entire chapter to short-term mission trips to think more deeply about that space and how it can become truly transformational. Another activity we looked at was child sponsorships. And child sponsorships are, it's now up to $5 billion a year industry. And it's curious, and it just sort of grabs your attention. This is one of the least efficient programs out there to help vulnerable children. If you want to help a vulnerable child, this is really not the way to do it. And yet these are extremely popular programs. And if you raise questions about child sponsorships, you'll get some serious pushback. Now, I want to say, if you're sponsoring a child, God bless you. Thank you. That's beautiful. And we would encourage you to continue to do so. And as you read the section on vulnerable children in the book, you'll get a sense of maybe the questions that you might raise with the program that you're working with, because with the lack of evaluation that's done on the child sponsorship programs, no one's really asking questions of the extended family, of the children, the unsponsored children who live across the street, or the unsponsored children even within that household. And there's some unintended negative outcomes that we need to think about as we look at that as a mission strategy. Well, a third and final way that congregations engage in mission to the tune of billions of dollars each year is orphanages. You all may know that orphan care, or institutionalized care of orphans, is one of the least effective ways to care for kids. It's 5 times more expensive to care for a child in an orphanage than in an extended care or community care or in foster care. And so we're not throwing the book, we're not, discounting the important work that some orphanages do, because they can provide what a child needs. It could save a child's life. And so we don't criticize that. At the same time, we want to raise some questions and find, are there ways that we can rely on the people that God has placed around that child to care for that child? That would be mom and dad. About 80% of orphans in the majority world have at least one parent alive. Well, all of this research that we did, talking with more than 1,200 mission leaders, raised some poignant questions to us. And we had to ask questions like this. Does our fascination with the needy child keep us from seeing the child's parents, their extended family and community? Why do we almost always exclusively focus on poverty's symptoms rather than on its causes? We're curious, what's that about? Yeah, go ahead, Bala, please move us on. Yeah, I just wondering, why are we so focused on those symptoms when many of our global partners say, in fact, we are the people sitting on boards, working in congressional offices, et cetera, who could really make a difference in some of the causes of poverty? Why are we reticent to see our role? One Peruvian mother asked me this question. Her child was one of the sponsored children in a child sponsorship program in Peru. Would you want a foreign adult writing regularly to your 7-year-old daughter? She asked me this question. I realized, of course not. I wouldn't want, are you kidding? And I've never met this person. Are you crazy? No, I don't want that input to my daughter. And yet we assume that because we have money in our pockets, we have the right to engage and even morally shape this child, whose parents we may not have never met. So these are some questions. Another question we would ask is this: why do we in US, particularly US dominant white culture, we who so highly value efficiency, routinely invest in highly inefficient programs whose impacts have not been studied? That's the curiosity that we have. And so with these questions that were raised by the research that we did, I'll move to, it's shaped us to understand the 2 crises that congregational mission leaders across the communions in the United States are facing. One is selfie mission, which is we would describe as where the purpose of mission has shifted from service to neighbor, as traditionally framed. It's moved on to something very different, which would be a sense of personal transformation. Well, that's the first challenge that our mission leaders are facing, and we describe it as a crisis. The second is this: we would call it the unexamined colonial legacy of mission, where we understand ourselves to be well-intentioned people with an obligation to solve the problems of the poor. This leads us into a kind of a trickle-down blessing arrangement where we think we're God's hands and feet in a situation, and we are the answer to the poor's problems. when in fact the gospel message shows us a very clear understanding of a round table, not a help desk, but a round table where people from east and west and north and south, rich and poor, are invited to the table to share what they have and contribute to the future that God is making among us. So we lift up three specific stones, that is three approaches to mission that we think are really important and sort of provide a foundation for congregations trying to do a reset on the mission work that they're engaged in, whether that's local or global. And that would consist of this. The first would be what we would call a theology of companionship, which is that Christ-centered circle of friends that reach out, that include others, and that turn the world on its head. That to us is a theology of companionship that's characterized by radical mutuality. The second stone we call cultural humility. And in this culturally diverse world, just within our own communities, even in communities that we perceive to be monocultural, differences in gender identity or gender, differences in economic class or first language, all of these have put particular nuance in our relationships, our intercultural relationships. And we sense that we need a heart of humility, following again in the way of Jesus Christ. We need a heart of humility that can provide a way for us to use cultural proficiency, to be sure, but in service to our neighbor. That's the second stone, cultural humility. The third we call Codevelopment. It's a term that we're coining, I guess, with this book. But I remember hearing some old, so many old missionaries at retirement when they said a statement like, "I received more than I gave." And that sort of opened our ears and our minds to think of development, not in the incredibly imperialistic way that international economic development programs work, making the poor more like us, helping them to develop along our path of development, this kind of unilinear evolution to society, as was popular in anthropology in the late 1800s. But we seek a kind of co-development whereby we together as companions in God's mission remove barriers from each other's path and provide tools to each other so that we can develop ourselves, because that's the only way we can, in fact, grow. Well, that's really the first half of the book. And then the second half, we just lift up what I'd call points of light, that kind of philosophy that looks for where there's some innovative mission leaders in local congregations. And First Presbyterian Colorado Springs, First United Methodist Church of Shreveport, Louisiana, Johnstown Presbyterian Church, Westmont Presbyterian Church in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, places across the country, Catholic, evangelical, and mainline. And we just lift up conversations with their leaders, their congregational mission leaders, to help shed light on ways that we can lead our congregations more effectively. Well, I wrote the narrative part of the book. But one of the most interesting parts of the book and we're seeing it's really driving sales, actually, and that is the 7 tools that Bala created and has published in this work. And Bala, tell us a bit about those and walk us through one, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, Hunter. Yeah, so these tools basically are developed in such a way because when we interview and talk with church mission leaders, basically what they are looking is not only strategies, but they also look for tools how to engage or how to lead their churches in God's mission. And so these 7 tools birthed out from that conversation. And so I'm going to just kind of go through a little bit of the tool number 1, which is kind of cover all the more or less the message of what we are trying to do in the book. And this basically, the tool number 1 calls What's in a Picture, basically is a guideline for representing others through our photography or through a picture that we take. And because whenever we see a group going on a mission trip or participate in some mission engagement, whether in food pantry or any place, most of the time we see we love to take picture because with the technology of advance of technology, we like to share picture and snap a picture without really thinking through. And most of the time, our picture, the way we portray our mission partners is basically kind of more or less describe or show how we understand or how we see mission. So we'll just walk through a little bit of some of the guidelines. I won't go into a detail, but we'll just go like 3 elements from these guidelines, and then there will be some exercise that will like you to engage. So the first one, the first thing in terms of taking picture, for some of you who are into photography, you know that the position or the composition is a big thing in an image, because, you know, an image can speak a volume of words. So first, the position of the camera, the question we need to ask before we take picture or before we share a picture on social media is, does the composition or angle of this photo disempower or marginalize the subject? Because as you can see, if we take a picture from a top down bottom, basically it convey a message to the people, to the audience who look on the image. The next element is the substitution. This is basically asking the golden rule question, like, will I consent to this photograph? It is if it were a picture of me or my child or my community. If we ask that question, I believe most of the time we want to take or we want to share any picture that portray a negative connotation towards our community that we work with. So it's important to ask that question. Then the third one that I want to share here is the power. Who is the doer in these picture? Because most of the time, of course, we like to take picture to share with our church that we help people during our mission trip or during our volunteer work. But oftentimes those images can reinforce comfortable colonial and racist stereotypes. So with those 3, there are 6 elements within that tool. If you have the book, you can look more into that. But here I just want to lift up those 3 things. So I just want to go through, show some image, and as Shan had invited you, if you can share on the chat, don't worry about it if it's not possible, but you can just take a look at an image and see what do you see in an image. So the first image is here. What do you see in this image? I believe when you look at this image, probably you will see a lonely child. There's no context at all. Where is his parent? Like, is he by himself in his own neighborhood, or is he in a refugee camp? The way he looked sad and kind of look scared at times, and so it's kind of like this is the image that most often time we will see in some of the mission agencies or organization, and so it's kind of show the powerless of this all the vulnerability of this child.
Bala, I have a few responses
Yeah.
I have a few responses from participants. I'd be happy to read them off so everybody can hear them.
Yeah.
We have one person says a frightened child. Another person says child is dirty, places the photographer in the place of helper, decontextualized completely, so we don't know where the child is. We've got, I see, Barbara says, I see a dirty face. Child has to look up at the photographer. Another person says he looks confused. Someone else says a helpless child. Another person says, Jake says a symbol, not a person. Tina says, I see fear, a dirty face, uncertainty, stiff lip, I think. So exactly what you're pointing out, I think our audience has seen.
Yeah. Thank you, that Shan, and thank you for everyone for sharing that. Let's move to the other image, the next image here. There's also, the image that we often see, especially during mission trip or plays that we've seen in some organization. And of course, this basically just show these two children uncomfortable by the way this young lady engage with them. So they are not fully engaged. I know if you have any response from anyone, what do they?
Yes, Barbara says, not sure the child is liking the kiss. So you can see the face of the child that's sort of in the crook of the arm. Hunter says uneasy children. Jake says reinforcement of a power stereotype. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of the white savior complex that we can see in here. Yeah, thank you. We'll go to the last image here. What do you see in this image? This basically is an image of a person engaged with these children, and it's kind of a different way to engage with them, in the same level. I don't know if there's any comments in regard with this image.
We've got some comments here. Jake says, no, wait, I'm sorry, my screen's moving a little bit. Yeah, Jake says, I like this image side by side because people are next to each other. Barbara says, play where players appear equal. Susan says, kids are protagonists here, active and engaged. Tisha says, seems to be a bit more equal and all are participating. And yeah, they seem to be having fun, don't they?
Yeah.
Real fun.
Yeah.
Tina also adds comfortable multicultural context, play appears in collaboration and equal.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for all those comments. Yeah. So, you can do this activities with your church, and you can just pull some image and help people think through those images, because image through image will able to not only see the wrong truth in that image, but also it help us as individuals to be aware when we take a picture and share our picture in social media, because that portray how we understand mission. So yeah, thank you for that. And yes, definitely, as we talk through, in the book, basically, we know that people will still, people will still engage in short-term mission. People will still engage in orphanage care or child sponsorship. But the way we try to do is to help people to move in the right direction while engaging in that. So to end with a quote from Maya Angelou, who said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." So that is kind of the message that we want to convey through our book. And finally, if you want to buy the book, beside the website that Shan had shared, you can go through IVP Press and use code MISSION. You can get 30% for plus free shipping. And then if you want more resources, you can go to our website, www.freeingmission.com. And then if you want to grow in your missional leadership, you can enroll on a 4-course graduate certificate in missional leadership that will start this coming February. And if you're interested in the certificate, you can contact us at wmi@pts.eu. Yeah, with that, we're grateful to take any question and any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. And I'm already seeing some questions in the chat, so I'm just going to start with other folks first. Michelle Spomer said, as we were looking at that last photograph where the children and the older person were kind of playing together on an equal level, Michelle asks, would our answers be different if the man were white? So does that change the dynamic? And then Barbara followed up with that and said, sort of following Michelle, I said the players appeared equal because the man appears intentionally to crouch down and he had to turn to look at the photographer just as the kids did. But interesting question. So this actually really does bring up a huge chapter in your book, which is the unchecked baggage chapter, in terms of the white supremacy and racism coming out of the colonial period that are flowing through some of the decisions that we've made in mission. So perhaps this is a great question to start with, if you all don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there's different, because when we share this image at one of our talk, basically one person, people said this is the completely different, it changed the scenario, or it changed the understanding, because most of the mission picture is very rare to find a mission picture that is like a person of color engaged, as a participant that engage with other children, because most of the picture are a white person with people of color. So definitely it's make a difference if it's a white person, in terms of especially because this that last image, it kind of showed that mission is not only just from the Western world, as we all know, or from the white privilege to the underprivileged, but more is about mutual engaging, and also learning from one another. So yeah, that is what my take with that.
Thank you for that. And it makes me think about one of the stories that threads through the first part of the book. And it's a story that Hunter tells about Ben Nti, who is a Ghanaian minister who is a graduate of PTS and went to Iowa. He was my neighbor at PTS before he and Edna and Praise left to go to Iowa. I know they're back now, but anyway, that is kind of flips the script a little bit in terms of assumptions about who's doing what mission, because Ben's understanding of himself as a Ghanaian minister was to go on mission to Iowa. So perhaps that would be an interesting counterpoint to some of this other stuff, if one or both of you would like to speak to that.
Well, sure. Yeah, thanks for that, Shan. I think what we were trying to do in the book is just to lift up the incredible creativity and graciousness of our God, who deploys amazing people in all walks of life, from all countries and all cultures and all languages. And for some reason, because this colonial script is so strong and so binds our, binds our ability to see broadly and see more clearly what God is doing in the world, we tend to sort of just limit God's ability to work. And so by lifting up a story of Pastor Ben T, he for me, as I got to know him, and Shan, I know you and others who know him feel this way, he so embodies everything that we would think would be exactly what a missionary should be. And he's doing it in the wilds of rural Iowa, cornfields. And I have him speak at classes when I teach at Pittsburgh Seminary, because he carries this self-understanding, a self-perception as a missionary, and he is here doing the mission of God. And it is compelling. I had 3 students afterwards say, this was the best thing that you've done in this class this whole semester. I mean, so it's really it's such a compelling story. And I think just what Bala was saying, it flips the script, because we're not anticipating, we don't realize those colonial blinders have really racialized mission. And so we assume that mission is done, from the best of the West to the rest. And in fact, we see God so much more creative than that and erupting in places of justice and peace and righteousness all over this world.
Bala, I don't want to step on your toes if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I think what Hunter had said, you know, I mean, you know, I mean, with the change of the you know, the Christianity, the landscape of Christianity itself, right, being like now the majority Christian world is not in the West, is in the global South. So definitely as a Western church or as U.S. church, we need to kind of like open being embraced and open to the ministry from people that travel or that live in the United States, as Pastor Ben and others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like I think this is the chapter that's the Theology of Companionship chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I was interested, and I told you I was probably going to say something about this, but I was interested in that chapter and others, because one of the points you make is that someone who is doing some transformative work in this area is a learner, is somebody who's in the position of being willing to be vulnerable and open to transformation themselves, and to see what God does in the mix instead of putting themselves sort of in from the God's eye position, so to speak. So could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I found that to be a refreshing, that theology of companionship with some of these various elements that are in it, to be a really interesting and helpful way to sort of unpack that baggage that you talk about in I think that's chapter 2, but I could be forgetting my numbers.
No, I think you're right on. I think actually it's chapter 3, but I think that theology of companionship to me is fascinating, Shan, because I went at age 24 as a volunteer in mission to the DR Congo, right, then known as the Republic of Zaire. And I was so socialized before going and by the church expectations. And when I got there, by the ways that Congolese received me, I understood that I was an expert. Now I was, you know, runny nose, wet behind the ears, whatever you say. I had no idea what I was doing. I barely spoke, you know, passable French. I knew no Chiluba and had to, you know, jump into that language learning. What's fascinating to me to this day is I had a clear sense that I was God's hands and feet in that situation, and I needed to tell somebody what to do. And so it just invited me into this rather thoughtless position of power. And I think the Congolese had been well trained by 100 years of Presbyterian mission to expect that these folks arriving, you know, on the last plane, you know, come into our community, and they probably know something about our community that we don't know. And so I think it's that realization, if we can just sit with that and see how wild and crazy that is. And it must, you know, I don't know if it makes God laugh or cry, but it does invite us to move beyond this highly racialized and therefore highly racist understanding of mission, where we assume that, you know, your US passport allows you to step in and speak into some of the most intimate pain that anyone can experience, and you have to step back from that picture and say, okay, wait, who am I in this picture? I'm invited in to walk with them. And I think it's just a helpful reset, and our prayer through this. Bala and I have sort of watched COVID roar through these years, and we submitted the final manuscript, and I think it was June of 2020. And so we were like scratching our heads, when is this book going to come out, and in what world will it come out? But it was such a gift to see that many congregations, by God's grace, are engaging in a reset. It's a moment to recalibrate because they sense something's not right. And so this book is really dedicated with a lot of love to these congregational mission leaders, Catholic, evangelical, and mainline, because they're ready, many of them, to move their congregations in a deeper engagement of mission.
Go ahead, Bala.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of in terms of the vulnerability and companionship, being just one example being, I remember when I first moved to the United States, the first job that I work is a walk in it's basically is a drop-in center for adults with mentally challenged. I was there and worked with these individuals, right? So in some ways, like I'm in some ways, since I'm very new to the country, like vulnerable being new to the country, but at the same time, these individuals, even though they have some challenge, but they in so many ways, they help me to kind of, because I'm in a vulnerable state myself, it helped me to kind of learn from them and kind of joining alongside one another. So I think it's the state of this being vulnerable, set ourselves in a vulnerable state can help us to walk alongside rather than just I got it all and we can do this thing without it can go in one direction rather in a mutual direction that we want.
Yeah, it made me think a lot about working together to understand what God is asking of us. Reading y'all's book made me think a lot about that, because a lot of times I'm an educator, so I sit in a trained theologian, so I think that I know things, and so I want to go in and like make my thing happen because I think I know best because I've studied it for so long or whatever. And the truth is that it's actually there's a cooperative possibility here if those of us who think we know stuff can be open to that. And, I was thinking too, as I was reading the book about how in some ways, some of the stories you tell, Hunter, are about what the Quakers would call being eldered, literally by elders, but sometimes by children, or as the example you just gave, Bala, about adults that have challenges, that you're being eldered by people that are you thought you were going to help or to save or to fix or whatever your thinking is around that, and instead they're actually teaching you a lot and in transforming everybody together. So
Shan, I'm just thinking, just the radical concept that we see in Scripture, the God who dares to engage us as co-creators. Give me a break. This is blasphemous. It must have been blasphemous to first century ears. Mm-hmm. And yet that's the God we serve. So I do think it is the way of God. And unfortunately, we've shellacked over that table, that mission table, so much that we only see this racialized component, and we assume that we have to go in a controlling way and teach them, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the terms that I found popping up through the book was it was kind of an upside down theology, that Jesus is teaching an upside down approach, that's a helpful way to think of it, because we think the cart's just going along like this and we're supposed to be driving it or whatever, but this is about like flipping the whole thing. So the last shall be first, and so that is a really helpful insight for me as a reader. Let me take a moment and just make sure everybody's paid attention to the chat and sees the purchase code that Bala mentioned, and also another link to IV Press where you can use that code to get a discount for the book. Also, the other the resources, Tisha's put those up, including the website for Freeing Mission and the Barber Library Lib Guide. We also have a question from Jake Judy, and I want to be sure to get that in, and I want to encourage our other participants to please put your questions in. This is your chance to actually have a conversation with experts who have written a book on this and thought about it and talked to a lot of pastors and mission leaders around the world and the country. Jake asks, how do you think a Western understanding of the image of God influences mission engagement overseas? Very helpful question. Thank you, Jake, for that.
Bala, you up for that, or?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind, is definitely the Western understanding of God as just take me to what Scott shared, especially in his lecture, the image, the painting, the expansion of the West, where
American progress.
Yeah, American progress. That image of God, like as God is just a conqueror who make you prosper, right? Or who will guide you, or who will lead you wherever you are and make you success. I know that kind of like make me think of the understanding of God in people and in Western culture, even in the missionary back, that enable them of course, that enable them to venture in the vast territory all over the world. So I know that is kind of what struck me that comes to my mind, that oftentimes misled some people to engage in God's mission. And yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I keep thinking, and welcome to Jake, and Jake's looking at teaching with this book. He's teaching students at Waynesburg University. I think, Jake, for me, that image, the theological certainty that we have, that Scripture testifies to, that we are all created in God's image, that does two things. In the Western world, it reminds us that we are connected. We're part of a larger body together with everyone. And so that connects us with everyone. We're not better than anyone else. And we're not, but though we are different, right? All of us manifest that image of God in different ways. The second piece, though, that I think is more problematic, when it mixes with some of these elements, historic Western culture, particularly from the late 15th century, the colonial era, we have sort of shaped or twisted this image of God theology into we're the hands and feet of Jesus. And whereas, God does use us in God's mission, praise God, we can begin to think that we are not only the hands and feet, but we're the head. And so we're thinking through, and we're making decisions, and we're controlling God's mission. And that's where I think we get into some real problems. We tend to, hierarchalize mission, when in fact, I love the Ethiopian Orthodox mosaic that shows, and this is from like the 7th century, and it shows the picture of Jesus washing the feet of the 12 apostles. And it says, "Behold the God-man who washes feet." And it just sort of holds on to that massive contradiction, this upside down kingdom, this upside down realm of God, that this is the God we serve, God on God's knees, as opposed to God commanding or lording it over the Gentiles. I think that's really important. And I think oftentimes in mission, we miss out on that. So this is just an invitation, kind of a plea. And I don't, you speak of us as experts, Shan. I think our biggest qualification, I'll speak for myself, my biggest qualification to write the book is I've made just about every mistake I speak of in the book. So it's written with a lot of love, because all of us are in this together, and congregational mission leaders face a very tough challenge because they're fighting this colonial legacy and this epidemic of narcissism that is just so massive in US culture right now. It's all about us. Take care of yourself, look out for number one. And so our hats off to these leaders who in local settings are trying to open a window to see the world through this lens of mission.
Tell me some more about, and Jake says, thank you for your answer to both of you. I want to know a little bit more about, like, how are these congregational leaders and others responding to the book? And, what's happening on the ground, I guess, as you talk with people, as you get feedback from them? Is it helping to open the window?
Yeah, I mean, I think most from what we've heard, people really appreciate and really, it's kind of what, because like, as I said, what the book is written in response to the needs and the tools in response to the needs that raised by these mission leaders. And most of them actually really grateful for that. And of course, I mean, as I mentioned to you, Shan, yesterday, that of course there are some here and there that like said they read the book like within second chapter and then stop reading it because it's too much, or it's, it's especially when it has to do with the race, the colonial past, that sometimes people feel like we can, feel uncomfortable in regard with that. So, but overall, we've had a positive response, and people and churches have been inviting us to kind of help them, especially as they study together as a group and as a presbytery or as churches. So yeah, I know. Is there anything to add, Hunter?
Yeah, only to say that we're seeing on freeingmission.com, that website that we put together just to put up resources that these congregational mission leaders have been asking for. We lift up the idea of a mission leaders circle. And we're seeing these mission leaders circles. People say, okay, we're going to get together and we're going to spend 6 or 8 weeks reading the book, chapter by chapter, and then let's talk about it and see how we could apply some of these learnings to the ways that our congregations engage in mission. Let's play a little game with Bala's tool number 1 and see how is it that we proceed. Let's look at our church website and think about how are we portraying those people who we're called to love in the name of Jesus Christ. Why are we always portraying them as poor, as needy, as, it really, those kinds of things are helpful in that space of a mission leader circle. So we're seeing those spring up. I think Sardis Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 churches in the Sacramento, California area, congregations in Boston, Chicago, different places are just sending a note saying, hey, we're reading your book. Several presbyteries of the PCUSA are starting to read the book, and we've been invited to speak at, I don't know if it's 10 or 12 presbyteries so far. So as this develops, we'll be putting on that website, freeingmission.com, some of the ways that congregations are engaging to help give ideas and strategies and best practices to others.
That is really helpful. And I mean, it seems like you're still doing a lot of information gathering. I mean, hearing back from people, and that there's kind of an iterative process going on here in terms of your learning, as well as what you're encouraging these congregations and their leaders to do. Processes where the feedback loop is actually informing what happens next and how things unfold. Rather than just seeing it as a straight linear type of activity.
In a sense, I mean, we're trying to do the impossible. I mean, this is harder than the camel jumping through the eye of a needle, to pardon the pun here. But I mean, so there's no sacred cow more sacred than mission in a church, right? If you attach mission to anything, you'll raise money, right? Because it moves the heart and people give to it, sometimes without reflecting, sometimes without thinking, without a sense of mindfulness. And so we lift that up. The other piece of it is we're inviting folks to look at the racialized legacy of mission. And that's one of the most difficult things in US society for us to talk about, and particularly in churches. So, to raise questions about that great sacred cow and to say, we got to talk about some hard issues to be able to engage faithfully and effectively in God's mission. We know it's a tall order. And so it is going to be iterative. It's all of us together. And I think, at least to speak for myself, I'm still decolonizing my understandings of mission. And I need to be really honest and open and a little bit humble about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that I was thinking about is how in some ways, and this may not be true for everybody, but you use the phrase that some people understand what they're doing as sort of winning souls for Christ, or that has been sort of a background tape that has been going for people for a long time. I know that's certainly something that I grew up with in the South in the US, and that you offer in the book both a different definition of mission, and I picked one out because you have several different iterations of this, but in chapter 1 you say mission is joining God in spreading the circle of relationships transformed by God's unconditional love and forgiveness, which is like so different than winning souls for Christ, for one thing, and also then pairing that new understanding of mission with Bala's active, basically it's a pedagogical set of pedagogical tools, it's lesson plans essentially, and they're excellent, and like paired together, there's like a full education taking place in terms of rethinking what mission is. That is hard lifting for people, I think. I mean, just because you have to not only change your mind and investigate your mind, but then you also have to change your behaviors and your activities and the way you organize the whole thing at the congregational level. I mean, it is like a thoroughgoing reformation, so to speak. And from my vantage point, I mean, I was reading it thinking, wow, I could have students in my classes read this book, and I don't do missiology or any of this stuff, but what you all do in this book opens it up for a lot of different other fields as well. I think you've provided a model here for a lot of us that do practical theology, which is really a gift, seriously. Yeah. And I'm not just saying that to be nice because you're on the book talks.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you, because I know you're a very gifted pedagogue. It does strike me also that if this weren't so important, this work, to see what passes for mission as engaged by so many U.S. congregations. I mean, I think, I don't know, what our understanding of what makes God cry looks like, but I think some of the things that we do in mission, they're so demeaning, and they're so, for us to assume, and I don't mean to pick on the child sponsorship folks, but to assume that we can engage in a child's life without any without any space of reference to the parents, or to that extended family, the aunt and uncle who is just down the road and caring for that child in so many ways. We can't do it all, to be sure, but I wish that we could be a bit more mindful in coming alongside and saying, what does this family need to be able to help this child to flourish? What a wonderful question to ask. And that's worth lots of Zoom meetings with a community that we're working with, whether that's near or far. We can do that just across the tracks in whatever city USA we're in, or across the oceans if it's a global context.
This connects up with something that one of our audience members, Julie, just put in the chat. It seems like this translates into local missions and not just global. So definitely, connecting those dots as well, and thinking about what it means to work in your own context and not think you always have to go somewhere else.
I would say a weakness. Go ahead, Bala, I'm sorry.
No, that's the thing, because oftentimes, like from my observation, most church, it's easy for churches to engage with someone overseas, because rather than within their own context, because especially if they have to deal with the racial aspect and the economic aspect, which is kind of like make them uncomfortable because they have to talk about those, and so it's easy for churches to engage with someone overseas. But it's important that we engage also with the local or the context.
Thank you for that. We have, I'm going to have one more question. I know we're at 5, but I want to get Jake's question in before wrapping up. He asks, in your experience, what are the most prevalent obstacles faced by rural congregations who are dying but refuse to change the way they engage mission? In other words, why is there a tendency to sit in place and silo instead of raising their gaze to include more people in their scope of mission practices?
Beautiful question, Jake, and that I think that question would be voiced with a lot of pain by many rural pastors who struggle with this day in and day out. But I'd say with a lot of love, it does strike me that what is at issue is a question of control. As long as I hunker down, keep the defenses high, spend down the endowment or the budget, slowly our members gray and pass on, I'm still in control. And yet the essence of mission is stepping out into that liminal space, stepping out in that space that I no longer control. Because Shan and I, as we walk down the road together, she may say something that surprises me. She may move in a direction. She may want to go in a direction that I don't think we should be going. And so I've lost control of the enterprise as soon as we hit the road in God's mission. And I think the most difficult thing, not just rural congregations, but all our congregations, the most difficult thing is to relinquish control. And yet unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it can bear no fruit. I think that's the calling for many of our congregations today.
Yeah, I mean, just to chime in regards with, being a pastor in rural South Dakota. I mean, it's just to get people to go out and engage in within the, for example, a food pantry or something like that. We have difficulty in terms of doing that, because people just kind of feel comfortable to write a check, or send money rather than just really be up there, engage, which oftentimes is the case with most churches anywhere, whether rural or urban area. Yeah.
And that's why we're particularly excited about this certificate program that the seminary is opening up, Shan, the certificate in missional leadership. It starts next February in 2023. Bala and I will be collaborating in that. We'll have cohorts of learners together who are going to be asking these questions. And I think there's going to be a good number of pastors who, they don't want to go to Zambia. They're not looking to go global. They just want to change the relationship of their congregation with the surrounding community because life has changed. So we're excited about that certificate program.
I'm really happy for y'all that you're doing this and for the people who will be participating with you. If it's anything like this book, it's going to be really, really rich. I absolutely hate to end this conversation because I got like a zillion other questions to ask you, but we're way past time. I want to remind everybody to look in the chat for the links. And also Tisha just put the link to the certificate in missional leadership so that folks can go look at that. I want to acknowledge Julie also said that mission is a matter of stepping out in faith, as it is God who is ultimately in control. And thank you for that. Sorry, I didn't get that in a little bit earlier. I want to say once more to Hunter and Bala, thank you for this very fine book. I mean, I really didn't know what to expect, not because I don't think you guys do great stuff, but I just didn't know what it was going to be like. And the book has been a really great read for me, and I've enjoyed it a whole lot and can see it multiple uses for it. So thank you for that and your insights on, intercultural studies, mission work. I mean, so many education. I mean, so many things going on here. It's just a cornucopia. I want to thank the audience for being here because you've made it more rich that you were here and added your voices to what we've been doing. I want to also invite everyone back here either online or in person on Thursday, June 23rd at 7 p.m. We're going to do another book talk with Dr. Gareth Higgins, who will be teaching this June in the Doctor of Ministry program in Creative Writing and Public Theology, for which I'm the faculty mentor. We're going to discuss his new book, How Not to Be Afraid, 7 Ways to Live When Everything Seems Terrifying, that also provides some practical approaches to helping yourself and others wade through all of the things that we're seeing in the world and experiencing right now with all the topsy-turvy. So again, to Hunter and Bala and to my colleagues, thanks again. It has been a joy to be with all of you today. And I hope everybody has a happy weekend, and that if it rains, you've got a great umbrella and you'll just go about your world and do your thing. Happy reading to everyone. And again, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Mhm.